The question of whether we can be good without God is, honestly, one of the most important we can ask. For centuries, many have believed that our moral compass is a gift from a divine creator. They argue that without the steady hand of religion, humanity would just, descend into chaos, selfishness, and depravity. This idea is deeply embedded in our cultures, our laws, and even our personal intuitions. We are told that holy books provide the ultimate roadmap for right and wrong, and that fear of divine punishment or hope for eternal reward keeps our worst impulses in check. But is this actually true? Or is it possible that this long-held belief is not only mistaken, but actively harmful? This is not a mere academic debate. The answer has profound consequences for how we live and organize our societies. If morality is truly inseparable from faith, then secularism is a dangerous path. It would mean that nations moving away from religious governance are setting themselves up for moral collapse. It would imply that our non-believing friends, neighbors, and family members are somehow deficient in their ethical core. Conversely, if morality can and does exist independently of religious doctrine, then we can have a different kind of conversation. We can start to build a universal ethical framework based on reason, empathy, and a scientific understanding of human well-being. The stakes are, honestly, incredibly high. Clinging to the idea that morality comes only from religion forces us into unnecessary conflicts. It divides the world into believers and non-believers, suggesting one group has a monopoly on virtue. This framework makes it difficult to address global challenges that require shared human values, from climate change to human rights. It also prevents us from honestly critiquing the moral failings found within religious traditions themselves, such as the sanctioning of slavery, the subjugation of women, or the condemnation of love between consenting adults. To build a truly global and compassionate society, we must be willing to examine the foundations of our morality with intellectual honesty. Therefore, we must confront this question directly. Can we be good without God? The answer, I believe, is a clear and resounding yes. Morality is not about obeying ancient commands from a book. It is about reducing suffering and increasing well-being for conscious creatures. This is a project that all humans can participate in, regardless of their metaphysical beliefs. It is a project grounded in the reality of the human condition, not in doctrines handed down from the Iron Age. By understanding this, we can move beyond the divisive and often counterproductive link between faith and ethics, and toward a more rational and humane future for everyone. For much of human history, religion has been the primary architect of moral codes. Sacred texts like the Bible, the Quran, and the Vedas are presented not merely as stories or spiritual guides, but as divine rulebooks for human conduct. They provide explicit commandments and prohibitions that have shaped civilizations. The Ten Commandments, for example, offer clear directives against killing, stealing, and lying, which have become cornerstones of Western legal and ethical thought. Similarly, Islamic Sharia law outlines a comprehensive system governing everything from prayer and charity to crime and commerce. These frameworks provided order and social cohesion long before the rise of modern secular states. The connection between morality and faith seems intuitive to many people for a powerful reason. Religion offers a complete package. It provides not only a list of rules, but also a compelling narrative for why those rules matter. Morality is framed as obedience to a loving, all-powerful creator who knows what is best for us. This cosmic authority gives moral laws a weight and certainty that purely human-made rules might lack. The promise of an eternal reward in heaven for the virtuous and the threat of eternal damnation in hell for the wicked serve as powerful motivators. This system of divine justice ensures that, in the end, everyone gets what they deserve, a concept that satisfies a deep human longing for fairness. Furthermore, religious communities provide a vital social infrastructure for reinforcing moral behavior. Through regular gatherings, rituals, and teachings, faith-based groups create a shared identity and a sense of mutual accountability. Members are encouraged to support one another in living up to the community's moral standards. The concepts of sin, repentance, and forgiveness offer a structured way to deal with moral failures and guide individuals back to the right path. For billions of people, the local church, mosque, synagogue, or temple is the central institution where they learn and practice what it means to be a good person, surrounded by others who share their deepest convictions. This historical and psychological intertwining of religion and morality has left a lasting legacy. It has shaped our languages, with words like moral and virtuous often carrying religious connotations. It has influenced our institutions, embedding religiously derived ethical principles into our legal systems. As a result, many find it difficult, if not impossible, to imagine a solid moral foundation that is not anchored in the divine. To them, a world without God is a world without a moral compass, adrift in a sea of subjective preferences and selfish impulses. The idea that morality could stand on its own, grounded in human reason and empathy, seems like a dangerous and unproven experiment. While religion has historically dominated moral discourse, secular philosophy has developed powerful ethical systems that stand entirely on their own. These frameworks do not rely on divine commands or supernatural rewards. Instead, they are built on reason, empathy, and observations about human nature and society. One of the most prominent is humanism, a worldview that places central importance on human dignity, reason, and compassion. Humanists believe that we can lead ethical and meaningful lives by working for the greater good of humanity. Morality, in this view, is about creating a just and humane society where every individual has the opportunity to flourish. Another major secular system is utilitarianism, most famously articulated by philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. The core principle of utilitarianism is simple yet profound. The most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. This greatest happiness principle transforms morality into a practical problem of maximizing well-being and minimizing suffering. It requires us to consider the consequences of our actions on everyone affected. For a utilitarian, the rightness of an act is not determined by its conformity to an ancient rule, but by its real-world impact on the happiness and welfare of conscious beings. In contrast to the consequence-focused approach of utilitarianism, Kantian ethics developed by Immanuel Kant emphasizes duties and rules. Kant argued that morality is based on a categorical imperative, a universal ethical principle. One formulation of this imperative is to act only according to a maxim that you could will to become a universal law. In other words, if you are considering an action, you must ask if you would want everyone in the world to act in the same way. This system prioritizes logical consistency and respect for rational beings. For Kant, certain actions like lying or breaking promises are always wrong, regardless of their potential good outcomes, because they cannot be universalized without contradiction. Finally, we have virtue ethics and moral intuitionism. Virtue ethics, with roots in ancient Greek philosophy like that of Aristotle, focuses on the character of the moral agent rather than on rules or consequences. It asks, what makes a person virtuous? And it emphasizes the cultivation of moral virtues like courage, honesty, compassion, and justice. The goal is to become a good person, from which good actions will naturally flow. Moral intuitionism suggests that humans have innate, intuitive moral senses. We just know that causing needless harm is wrong, much like we know that 2 + 2 = 4. This view posits that our evolutionary history has equipped us with a basic moral faculty that allows us to perceive right and wrong directly. Defenders of religious morality often imply that without faith, society's ethical fabric would unravel. They predict that a decline in religious belief would lead to a rise in crime, selfishness, and social decay. This is an empirical claim, and as such, we can look at the evidence to see if it holds true. When we do, we find a very different picture. Numerous studies and societal-level data have compared the moral behavior of religious and non-religious individuals and groups. And honestly, the results consistently undermine the notion that faith is a prerequisite for ethical conduct. The data simply does not support the idea that atheists and agnostics are less moral than their religious counterparts. Sociological research across developed nations reveals a fascinating trend. The most secular societies in the world, such as those in Scandinavia, including Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and parts of Asia like Japan, are also among the safest, most peaceful, and most prosperous. These countries have extremely low rates of violent crime, high levels of social trust, and robust social safety nets. If a lack of religious belief were a direct cause of moral decay, we would expect these highly secularized nations to be hotbeds of crime and corruption. Instead, they are widely regarded as some of the most functional and ethical societies on the planet, faring much better on nearly every metric of well-being than more intensely religious nations. On an individual level, psychological studies have